The harvest of the Scarecrow. The moon hung low in the ink-black sky, casting eerie shadows over the desolate farm. The air was thick with foreboding as the wind whispered secrets through the cornstalks. To those who dared venture close, the field appeared as ordinary as any other, a vast expanse of rustling, towering corn. But the locals knew better. They knew about the cursed land and the scarecrow that lurked within. Deep in the heart of rural Nebraska stood the Wilkins farm, an isolated, forgotten place shrouded in myth and dread. Generations of townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the malevolent spirit that inhabited that very cornfield. At the center of the field stood the scarecrow, a grotesque and nightmarish creation, its ragged form resembling a twisted mockery of a man. On a particularly chilling autumn night, a group of adventurous teens gathered around a bonfire, swapping tales of bravery and recounting their run-ins with the haunted scarecrow. The bravado flowed like the cheap beer they passed around, but beneath their laughter, an unsettling unease simmered. Jake, the unofficial leader of the group, puffed out his chest and declared, "I ain't afraid of that cursed scarecrow. Tomorrow night, we'll go out there, and I'll prove it's all just nonsense." His friends exchanged wary glances, but none dared to back down. They knew the legend well, the ominous tales of people disappearing without a trace after encountering the scarecrow. The following night, armed with flashlights and nerves of steel, the group of teens ventured toward the Wilkins farm. The moonlight cast eerie, elongated shadows that danced in rhythm with their racing hearts. Corn stalks rustled ominously, creating a discordant symphony of whispers. They reached the scarecrow at the center of the field. Its button eyes seemed to follow them, and its stitched grin held a macabre promise. Jake, determined to prove his fearlessness, stepped closer, shaking off the creeping dread. "You're just a pile of straw and old clothes," he muttered, reaching out to touch the grotesque effigy. As his hand brushed the scarecrow's tattered sleeve, a frigid wind swept through the field. The cornstalks bent and swayed, and the scarecrow's grin twisted into a wicked sneer. It moved. It was impossible, but it moved. Jake stumbled backward, his flashlight falling to the ground. The scarecrow stepped off its post with a grotesque, lurching motion. It stood there, an eerie silhouette against the moonlit cornfield, its limbs creaking as if rebelling against years of stillness. The teens watched in horror as it began to glide toward them, silent as death itself. "Run!" Jake screamed, terror clawing at his throat. His friends needed no further encouragement, and they sprinted through the cornfield, each step taking them deeper into the labyrinthine maze. The scarecrow pursued them with a supernatural speed, its limbs contorting in unnatural ways as it closed the distance. Desperation fueled their flight, but the cornfield seemed to conspire against them, leading them in circles, trapping them within its endless rows. One by one, the terrified teens were separated, their cries for help swallowed by the rustling corn. And with each disappearance, the scarecrow grew stronger, feeding on their fear and anguish. Hours passed, and only Jake remained, hopelessly lost in the heart of the cursed cornfield. He stumbled upon a clearing, the scarecrow lurking at its center, a fiendish grin permanently etched onto its straw face. The scarecrow spoke, its voice a chilling whisper that cut through the night like a blade. "You cannot escape, Jake. You are mine now, forever." Jake's eyes widened with terror as he realized the truth. He had underestimated the malevolent force that lurked in the cornfield. In that moment, he understood that there was no way out. The scarecrow lunged at him, and darkness swallowed his scream. The following morning, the townsfolk searched the Wilkins farm, but there was no sign of the missing teens. The legend of the haunted cornfield grew stronger, and the scarecrow, its wicked grin intact, stood once again on its post at the center of the field. The scarecrow had fed, and it would continue to do so, luring unsuspecting souls into the cursed cornfield, where they would become forever lost in the harvest of the scarecrow. As the years passed, the stories of the Wilkins farm and its malevolent scarecrow faded into legend. But in the quiet, ominous nights of autumn, the locals knew better than to venture too close to that desolate place, for the scarecrow still lurked, waiting for its next victim to wander into the harvest of the scarecrow. The Harvest of the Scarecrow, Part 2. Years had passed since the terrifying night when Jake and his friends had vanished into the haunted cornfield, becoming victims of the malevolent Scarecrow. The legend of the Wilkins farm and its cursed scarecrow had taken on an almost mythical quality in the small Nebraska town. Superstition kept most folks at a distance, and even the bravest dared not speak its name after dark. But the passage of time had not diminished the evil that lurked within the field. The scarecrow remained, patiently biding its time, waiting for new prey to stumble into its web of dread. One brisk autumn evening, a group of college students from the nearby city decided to test their courage. Armed with smartphones, flashlights, and skeptical grins, they embarked on a midnight adventure to explore the infamous Wilkins farm and debunk the eerie stories that surrounded it. As they crossed the creaking wooden bridge leading to the farm, they chuckled nervously and traded tales of the dreaded scarecrow. None of them truly believed the legends, convinced that it was all just a cruel joke perpetuated by the locals. Sarah, a fiery and determined psychology major, led the group. "Come on, guys, it's just a silly scarecrow," she said, her voice tinged with bravado. "Let's prove once and for all that there's nothing to be afraid of." They entered the darkened cornfield with a mix of excitement and skepticism. The moon shone brightly overhead, casting eerie silhouettes among the towering cornstalks. The air was still, and the rustling leaves and distant hoots of owls were the only sounds that broke the silence. Their laughter gradually faded as they ventured deeper into the field, the rows of corn creating a disorienting maze. Sarah led them with unwavering determination, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at the edges of her confidence. As they continued, they suddenly came upon an opening in the field, revealing the scarecrow, its grotesque form illuminated by the pale moonlight. Its button eyes stared out into the distance, and its stitched grin seemed to stretch even wider. Jeff, a skeptic-turned-believer, gulped audibly. "Okay, that thing is seriously creepy," he muttered. The group exchanged nervous glances but kept their distance from the scarecrow. Sarah, determined to prove her point, took a step closer, her flashlight illuminating its eerie visage. "See, it's just a bunch of straw and old clothes," she said dismissively. But as the flashlight's beam danced across the scarecrow, its eyes flickered, and its grin twisted into a malevolent sneer. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The scarecrow's tattered sleeve moved ever so slightly. Then, with a sudden, jerking motion, the scarecrow detached itself from its post, landing on the ground with a soft thud. It stood upright, its movements unnaturally fluid, as if it were a puppet on invisible strings. Fear gripped the group as they watched the scarecrow begin its sinister advance. Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. This can't be happening." The scarecrow, now free from its post, glided closer, its eyes locked onto Sarah. She stumbled backward, her flashlight slipping from her grasp and landing with a dull thud in the cornfield. In the darkness, the scarecrow's malicious whisper pierced the air. "You dared to enter my domain. Now, you are mine." The group scattered, desperately trying to escape the relentless pursuit of the scarecrow. The cornfield seemed to shift and change, creating dead ends and trapping them within its endless rows. Panic set in as one by one, the students were separated and vanished into the night. Sarah, separated from the others, found herself cornered in a clearing. The scarecrow, its grin now grotesque rictus, closed in on her. There was no escape, no way out. But just as it lunged at her, a blinding light pierced the darkness. A group of townsfolk, armed with lanterns and determination, rushed to the scene. The scarecrow hissed and retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the cornfield. The townsfolk helped Sarah to her feet, their faces etched with a grim determination. They knew the scarecrow's malevolent nature all too well, and they would not allow it to claim more victims. "We have to destroy it," one of the townsfolk declared, his voice filled with resolve. And so, with torches and pitchforks in hand, they set the cursed scarecrow ablaze, its haunting grin melting away into nothingness. The eerie presence that had haunted the Wilkins farm for generations was finally vanquished. But as the flames consumed the scarecrow, Its sinister laughter echoed through the night, a chilling reminder that evil could never truly be extinguished. The legend of the haunted cornfield and the scarecrow would live on, a warning to those who dared to venture too close, a reminder that some nightmares were all too real, and that the harvest of the scarecrow would forever haunt the darkened fields of their imaginations. The Harvest of the Scarecrow, Part 3. Years had passed since the scarecrow's malevolent spirit was seemingly extinguished in a blaze of fire and determination. The cursed Wilkins farm had fallen into disrepair, and the legends surrounding it had faded into whispers of the past. Most townsfolk chose to believe that the terror was finally over, that the scarecrow was nothing more than a horrifying memory. But the earth has a long memory, and the land had absorbed the darkness that had plagued it for generations. It bided its time, waiting patiently for the right moment to reawaken the malevolent force that had once dwelled within the scarecrow. One fateful autumn night, a group of urban explorers, drawn by the infamous legend, decided to visit the long-abandoned Wilkins farm. Armed with cameras and a hunger for adventure, they believed that the curse was merely a spooky tale to exploit for their online followers. As they entered the overgrown field, the eerie silence and the rustling of decaying cornstalks seemed to whisper warnings of danger. They brushed aside the warnings, dismissing them as the product of an overactive imagination. But the land had not forgotten, and the curse still lingered in the soil. It was patient, and it knew how to play on human curiosity. Deep within the field, they stumbled upon the remains of the scarecrow, a charred and mangled figure surrounded by scorched earth. It was a grim reminder of the night the townsfolk had tried to banish the evil. The urban explorers saw it as the perfect centerpiece for their video, believing that it would boost their online presence. As they set up their equipment and began filming, an unnatural chill settled over the clearing. The scarecrow, thought to be nothing more than a lifeless husk, began to twitch and writhe. Its mangled form slowly straightened, and its tattered clothes seemed to knit themselves back together. The explorers, caught in the moment, didn't notice the transformation until it was too late. The scarecrow's button eyes blinked open, revealing a malevolent glint. Its stitched grin stretched into a wicked smile, and it stepped off its post, landing softly on the ground. The explorer's camera caught the terrifying transformation, and their screams of horror were captured for the world to see. Panic and chaos erupted as they tried to flee, but the cursed field seemed to conspire against them, leading them deeper into its labyrinthine maze. One by one, they were separated and ensnared by the vengeful scarecrow. It toyed with them, driving them to the brink of madness before finally claiming them as its own. As the morning sun began to rise, the scarecrow returned to its post at the center of the field, its malevolent grin once again etched into its straw face. The curse had not been vanquished, it had merely been dormant, waiting for fresh victims to lure into its deadly embrace. The legends of the Wilkins farm and its malevolent scarecrow were reborn, more terrifying than ever. The townsfolk, who had once thought the nightmare was over, now lived in fear of the cursed land that had claimed so many lives. The trilogy of terror was complete, a chilling tale of a haunted cornfield and the scarecrow that defied destruction. And in the quiet, ominous nights of autumn, the locals knew better than to venture too close, for the harvest of the scarecrow was an eternal nightmare that would forever haunt their darkest fears.